Hello and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, and today I've got something a little bit different. Not mega different I suppose, but something I haven't really covered on the channel before yet, and that's cartoon planes or egg planes or whatever each manufacturer likes to call them. This manufacturer, Freedom Model Kits, not one I've heard of before, seem to be based in China. They're calling it Compact Series. I think Meng call them the Toon planes, and obviously you got Hasegawa egg planes. But I've not seen these before, and I came across this particular kit thanks to a friend at the Model Club, because he'd picked this up and shown it to me a while back, and I was really quite impressed with it. And then last week we discovered between us that these are currently on special offer at Hannants for £13, I think. So with that in mind, let's have a look at what you get in this actually sensible sized box. So just some cute little box art there. On the side you've got some pictures of a built one. On the other side a little bit about decals and such. So let's go on in. So it's quite the box full, as you can see. It's actually full. There are two models in here. Goodness me. If I'm not mistaken, I think the normal cost of this kit's £26, possibly. It's not super dirt cheap, but as you can see, you get a lot in there. So there's your actual aircraft parts, and then we've got two lots of basic weapons there, and we've got some crew figures here and then two separate sachets of other parts. So let's have a look then and see what this all looks like when we break it out of the bags. So nominally there's a single seat and a twin seat in here. There's the single seat, and there's the twin seat. So they each come on two racks. These are identical. Sprue E, and these differ per version, but both identified as A. Let's have a closer look then at the single seat. So we're moulded in a medium plastic. It's quite hard. The surface detail is quite deep. It's sharp, but it's quite, dare I say, trench-like. And details are simplified but quite nicely done nonetheless. See a one-piece undercarriage leg there. Central fuel tank. Got the intake area. Nice little exhaust. Some wheels. I'm going to, yes, this is definitely a snap together. Look at the size of those locating devices. And then the twin seat version obviously differs in that upper fuselage part has room for two. The rest of it, trying to figure out if it's, yes it is, okay. All laid out in the same way, and it is absolutely the same. Yeah, so obviously it's a sprue that's got the two seat is added on one end or the other, and they just snip them off depending what they're supplying. The other little part here has just got wing tips and the tail planes with the little lumps and bumps that go on the fin there. So in these other bags here we've got canopies. Obviously they're different from each other. Single seat one is much more bulbous. The two seat one obviously is that bit longer. But they're very clear, Very clear and very well finished. A little bit wobbly, visually a little bit of visual distortion, but really clear, shiny, lovely, nice transparencies those. And then, unlike most of the other cartoon type models, you get all this stuff. So there's 2 of this set here, and I'm not a weaponologist at the best of times, so I'm probably not going to immediately recognise cartoon weapons, so forgive me for that. But these appear to be smart bombs of some description, and then we've got a couple of pods. These are just tanks, obviously, and some missiles, presumably nominally AMRAAMs. You get 2 packets of that. This one, what we got in here? There's a ECM pod, well, more pods basically. That's a sniper-esque one there. Recce pod maybe. This is some nose and tail action. I'll look at the instructions in a minute and I'm sure all will become clear. And some big missiles. And this pack is the same again, but without the recce pod by the looks of it. So you've got 2 of these, 2 of these, yeah, same, just without that recce pod, if that's what it is. And finally, some pilots. Let's have a look now. Yep, that's a generic crew sprue replicated 3 times. So there's this little body and an arm, and then he has this big comedy helmet, which appears as though it comes with a windscreen. How nice is that? Probably a tinted or a clear option for the visor. That's interesting. So the main kits have pilots in them, but not nearly as involved as those. So let's put all of this aside and have a quick look at the instructions and see what that brings into play. Oh goodness me, look at this. There's a whole bunch of them. That's colours. So F-16B/D and F-16A/C. For some reason there are 2 the same. So you've got a sprue guide there, some useful tools and some little bits of instruction. And then we're on to the instructions themselves. And it's very simple, as you might expect. It all clips together. Very logical sequence, and things are trapped inside each other to make it easy to do without glue. Here's your crew at the bottom here. And the weapons. So, nominally they are AIM 9, AIM 120, mid fuel tank, GBU 10, AN/ASQ 213, AAQ 33, AGM 84, AN/AAQ 14 and 13, and AN/ALQ 184. Quite the armoury, and some suggested loadout options here. I'm not sure whether these pylons and weapons click on and off so that you can change them around, but we'll see. We'll see. And then the BD is going to be exactly the same, it's just that slightly different fuselage and canopy arrangement. Same weapons. And recce pod. So the recce pod is for the 2-seater. And obviously you've got 2 pilots, which it tells you to do 2 times. Colour schemes in this one. So this one is the RoCaf edition. There are, if you go on to Hannants and have a look, several different boxings of these kits in various different schemes and services that you can look at. So the schemes we've got here: 401st, TCW, 27th, TFG. Not going to lie, it means nothing to me, but that's your standard sort of F-16 two-tone grey with some nice sort of low-vis markings on it. This is a two-seat one which has got non-low-vis markings on it. I did actually build a kinetic F-16 years ago, and it had this sunburst thing on the fin. And then two separate options over the page. No, they're not, it's just one. This is the same one again, but this one has got teeth and a tiger on it, celebrating the flying tigers of World War II very blatantly. Interesting stuff. So that's all of those, and finally let's have a look at these decals. It looks like a nice little sheet in here. They do look lovely. They're glossy, got a nice tapered carrier film, they're quite thin. Hold it up for the light so you can see what I'm talking about. Those do look very, very nice. We've got some limited stencil details, we've got instrument panels for both, and actually all the stripes and whatnot for the weapons. So that's a really nice little decal sheet. Quite impressive. So I'm actually going to go a completely different route than I always do. This isn't a quick look or a quick snip, this is actually going to be a build, and I'm going to get on and actually build and finish these two little baby models and see how long it takes me and see how much fun I have. And I will document it for you as I go along, hopefully in an exciting manner. So here we go, let's get on with this. Right, so this is the parts laid out to make the basic model. Clearly the weapons fit is going to vary depending on what you want to do, and that would probably constitute the same amount of parts again actually. But let's put it together because it doesn't take long, and we'll start as the instructions suggest with the fin area. And because I wish to deal with seams as I go along, I'm going to introduce a little super glue to the mix. I've got some sat at the side here. So in all the places where there's going to be a visible seam when the parts are put together that I want to deal with, I'll put a bit of super glue in there so that I can then remove said seam without a big long wait time. So simply line it up, push it together, lovely big click, and push the front part together. This is one of those click fit kits where once you click things together they are not coming apart again. So if you want to play test fitting and whatnot, then you're going to need to enlarge fitting holes and things so that you can put the pieces together and take them apart again, because otherwise it's a one-shot deal basically. This tail cone area slots through there like so. Just line it up, put the top half on, the other half even. Again, some of the parts go with a big bang click, and other parts it's just a sort of the gradual slow press gets it in. But that's the fin done. Excuse me. Now the intake, if you want to fit pylons to the intake area, you must pre-drill some holes, which denoted rather ambiguously, to be honest, by these little chevrons inside. Just this here, there's two there. You need to try and drill through. It does not say what size. At least it does 1.2. Right, let's give it a go then. Let's get a 1.2mm drill. My apologies, Freedom Model Kits jolly well does tell you what size to use. 1.2mm. That's through. If I can get at the second one. It's underneath the big joining piece. I'll just go through at an angle like that and come back out again and then finish it from the other side. Like so. Alright, that's those drilled. That one looks a little bit on the slosh, but I followed the guide, so what you're going to do, right, again, in order to deal with the seam line, I'm just putting some super glue along there. And then I'll push the parts together again. Click. And I've got super glue sat in that join so I can sand that back in a few minutes, and it will just completely remove any trace of it. This is personal choice, chaps. You know, these are just fun little things, and potentially mucking about filling seams isn't going to be very high on the list of priorities of things you want to be doing. Then the front one, the front part does need to be glued on, but you can see that it doesn't leave much in the way of a seam. I'll glue that on later when I've dealt with the centerline seam. So just as quick as that, we're on to these fuselage pieces. Now this is the lower one, and the way we attach all the wings is they simply sit on these pegs, and then they're trapped in between the two parts. Glue it, don't glue it, it's entirely up to you. There's not much in there to glue it to apart from the pegs themselves, to be honest. The tail planes I can and I will, because they sit a little more strongly, so just to stop them flapping about so much, really. They're not going to go anywhere unless you properly break them, so not once the lid's on anyway. This is that part where you need multiple hands. There's always a part on every model, even these fun ones. You need more hands than you're already blessed with. Alright, they're teetering in position, so we'll bring in the top half. And work your way around bit by bit. Pressing, pressing, pressing. And there we are. Now I haven't done the front for the same reason as before. I'm going to introduce a little super glue just into the very front part here. For the same reason as before. Click, click. That's in. And I'm going to hold the nose together to let that super glue go off. So I have got a little ahead of myself here. I was in and out of the bench yesterday, and just kind of forgot where I was with the video, to be honest, but I had a few minutes and thought I'll get the first colour on this thing. So this is the model all together, pretty much, and I have now painted the underside in Mr. Hobby Gunze Sangyo Aqueous. So this is the hobby colour, H308, which is FS36375. So that's the underside colour. And in order to save really quite a lot of time, what I tend to do with things like this, any model that's relatively simple, it starts to get more trouble than it's worth with really big and complicated efforts, but separate everything out, if not actually, mentally, into everything that needs to be the same colour. As you can see, I've chosen a weapons load. Oh, here's the missiles. Sorry, you can't see those. Four of these AIM 120 style rockets. Two for the wingtips, two on pylons, and then two of the AGM-84. Here, the sniper pod, another pod, which I've already just glued on because it's 308, so it's already there. The tanks, and then the recce pod for the centre line. All of those things that needed to be 308 are 308 at this point. I'm going to paint white next, so I'm going to separate out. I want white noses on these. These need to be white. Let's move them back there. The undercarriage leg, that needs a touch of masking, so I've painted this little bit and the doors in 308. And the wheels all need to be white, so that would be my next colour, and I'm going to just mask those up. I'm looking at the model itself, so you can see here the seams just on this little bit here at the nose. They were just, once the super glue had gone off, they were just sanded back. No further effort required there. Likewise, the centre part of this intake area would have had a big ugly seam on it had I not done that, and again obviously on the top of the fin. Those are the only places with glue, and those are the only places with filler so far. Well, no, that's it. The weapons wise, the tanks were in two halves. I just clipped them together and then used extra thin, waited for that to go off and sanded them back. Likewise, the same deal basically with the recce pod, the sniper pod, these big missiles, and also this pod here. And a quick point with these intake pylons, the way they're designed to fit is that the pegs go in horizontally, so the hole needs to be drilled horizontally, otherwise it doesn't really work. And I've ended up pretty much just gluing this one in place because it wasn't really happening as the instructions said they wanted it to. So the pylon for the sniper pod is just glued in, and this one is held in with glue. The canopy is masked like this because I'm going to tint it. So the way to tint any clear part, obviously use a transparent paint. You can use non-transparent paints, but you've got to be very careful. So I'm going to use Tamiya Smoke, that's X19, and I'm literally just going to spray it onto the inside of the transparency. And the reason I do that, all my other sort of comic kits, cartoon kits, whatever you want to call them, I have tinted the canopies because I think in a way it just seems to work for me. To my mind, they just look a little bit less comic-y, and I don't know, it's a personal thing. I didn't do it on the single seater, which you'll get to see in a bit, so hopefully you'll see for yourselves what sort of a difference it can make visually. Alright, I got the little tubs to paint it. So the paint is H308 underneath, as I said, which is FS36375. Then H306, which is the fin, this little front bit, and the outside of these underside ventral fins. H306 being FS36270. And then the darker colour, which the fin just pulls off incidentally, so I didn't have to mask it. The darker colour is H305, which is FS36118. I don't know if these are the correct colours, but that's what it says on the instructions, so that's what I've used. They've all been done all freehand with the Revolution 0.5 water, and then I have glossed it with my Tobacco Clear X22. For some reason of late this has been turning this heinous shade of brown in the jar, so I'm not going to be pre-mixing that anymore. Good coat, good couple, 3 coats of that on here for this nice sheen. It's not a beautiful smooth finish like my normal models would be at this stage, really, because it's a toy, so I'm just being very, very basic. But I did put a decent layer of gloss on it, because on the other one, which you will get to meet shortly, the decals showed a little bit of a tendency to silver, and that's probably as much as anything because there's quite a lot of texture here. I don't know if it really popped light. I do need to touch up the back of this stabiliser. I've got a fingerprint in it. There's quite a lot of texture in the parts. The plastic and the way they're moulded, it reminds me of 21st century kits. If anyone ever built any of those, it's quite similar. So yeah, I think maybe the texture had something to do with it, and I didn't put very much gloss on the other one, just a sort of a very basic coat, so I put a bit more on this one to help me out. Now as for the scheme, we're completely free to do what we want here, so I'm not really going to stick to anything. I want teeth, so I'm going to use teeth, but I don't want the tiger and I don't want the low vis, so I'm going to go high vis tail as per this idea here, with the teeth. Basically that's how I'm going to attack it. I'm not going to put this whatever that is, I'm not going to put that on because I don't really like it. I don't really like that just there either, to be honest. Maybe I'll put that on it instead, but yeah, I'm literally just going to put decals wherever I feel like putting them, because I can. So I'll do a couple to start us off. Put some of these roundels on, and likewise I think I'll probably put roundels on in all of the places and not just one wing, because I can. So I've got some water off to the side in my jar. It's just plain old water, nothing special about it, and I'll just dip them in there and pop them just on the lid out. It's out to the side because I don't want to get my filming background wet. And while they're soaking, I'll just start cutting out some of the other ones that I want to use. Off camera, of course. The problem I have, if any of you sit there cursing because I keep working off screen, the issue I have is that by habit I work over my lap. So although I've got this expansive desk in front of me, I work over my lap. So essentially when I'm doing things with my hands, you know, like this, I'm doing it not really over the bench at all. So for me to do it in shot for camera, I'm virtually working at arm's length actually. So it's very, very unnatural to me, and that's why I'm constantly reverting to just being invisible. So I apologise. I'm sure over time I'll gradually get used to not doing it, but then again, I'm documented as having a dislike for change, so it probably won't change anytime soon. Alright, so I'm going to use Tamiya Mark Fit Strong as my setting agent, again because the decals on the other one showed some signs of silvering. Just make sure they're moving. Which they are. Okay, so I have a star on my pincers here. So I put the Mark Fit Strong, paint a little puddle on the wing there. Drop my marking squarely into the puddle. And I'll super gently stab it with the tweezers. If you're going to use tweezers like I do to move decals around, please learn to be insanely gentle. and then cotton bud, I'm just rolling it across from one side to the other, and doing that rolling motion squeezes out all of the moisture and air from underneath that decal. And then I will overcoat the applied marking with a little bit more Mark Fit Strong. Mark Fit Strong seems to be quite ambidextrous with regard to whether you use it as a setting or a solvent. See, painted over it with that. And then I'm just really gently, and this time all I'm really doing is soaking up the excess. Get rid of that, and then leave that for some time to start the drying process, and just keep an eye on it. This one isn't over any panel lines or detail, so shouldn't really be any issues with it anyway, but I don't tend to use decal solvents unless I have to, because the risk of damaging the paint finish is quite high, so I use them when I need to rather than as a matter of course. I'll put a few more of these on, and if it requires any more comment I'll come back and let you know. Right, I finally got all the decals on. I say finally because there's a tiny bit of a faff in places, honestly. Let's take that off out of the way and show you that separately in a mo. None of these decals are remotely an issue, as you might imagine. It's just a flat surface. It'd have to be a pretty poor decal to be an issue on there. As I said I would do, I've mixed and matched, so I've put the shields down there just to wind it up. It's just a toy. Problematical ones were the shark's mouths, and that is because the way it has to fit to the model, it runs it directly across the forward part of this sort of chine area here, which is fine, except that as well as having to curve this way, it now also has to curve that way, which creates a situation where the decal doesn't really want to know. And despite repeated applications of solvent, it was a real struggle to get it to conform. It'd sort of go nearly there, but you'd end up with a bit of a wrinkle. So what I did in the end, I'm unsure how easily it will show. I'll give it a go. If you look at the black area just in the end of where that chine joins the forward fuselage, I've cut across into the decal. You may just about be able to see it. I'm looking at a tiny screen and I can't see it, so I'm not sure. But that cross, I cut that in there while the decal was still soft, and then applied more solvent and then pushed it down again with the cotton buds, and it's pretty much there now. And the thought was that that would relieve the stress because it wanted to form a wrinkle across here, and if the decal pulled apart at all, it's very easy to touch up a black area with a fine brush, but I don't think it did pull apart. It's just allowed it to lay down. But it did take repeated applications of solvent to get it to do that. I put the instrument panel ones on over here, and then on the fin we had similar issues actually with this sort of sunbeam that goes on the top there. The shape of the decal as supplied does not take into account this undercut on the sort of ECM fairing at the top of the fin, so when you push the decal down into there it pulls it away at the top, and that means I do now have to touch up this whole top area. In retrospect, and for anyone else wishing to do anything like this, it's probably worth cutting the decal so that you end up with a gap under here, which is going to be less visible and actually doesn't really matter, instead of, or maybe slightly less touching up on top, but it's inevitable honestly with something like this. But again, a lot of decal solutions were required to get the decal to conform to that degree, and just generally you can see that this crest hasn't gone down into the panel lines at all really. As I've shown you before, probably I like to use the side or the back of pointed tweezers just to push decals into panel lines if they're being awkward. It does work quite well, as long as you let the tweezer go along the line and don't push too much. You don't tend to rip the decals, it'll just push them in. But yeah, they are They are nice decals in use. They do work in the end. They are again on the sheet, but they are quite thick and quite strong. So sort of a standard decal solvent doesn't really cut it. It doesn't really soften the decal enough to get it to work in situations like this and on the fin. I ended up using the Deco Strong. This is your battleship guns when it comes to decal solutions. It's strong stuff, and even this took repeated applications to get these to settle. So that's a well, I don't know that this is aimed at kids, honestly, but it does add a slight bit of difficulty to the build that it would be better if it wasn't there, frankly. Alright then, so from where you have just seen, all that I've done is flat coated the main aircraft. I didn't flat coat any of the weapons, I've left them as they are just to provide a bit of contrast. I've used VMS satin. Despite being called satin, it's actually pretty flat, and it's, I think, hands down probably the best matte varnish I've found yet. You just have to smash it on and leave it. There's no finesse required whatsoever. And then just popped it together. I do have gluey painty fingers, so sorry about that, but there it is. You see, I've touched the fin in just with a paintbrush and some, that was XF7 and a bit of 7 mixed with 3 to give the orange at the front there. And this one is loaded for bear. We've got all of the weapons on this little thing. I don't know if that's representative or not, but whatever, it looks pretty cool. And that's it, there you have it, one completed toon plane, F6 toon. What about the other one I hear you say? Well, here it is. Clearly I went a bit left field with that, and I finished that as a Royal Air Force F-16 in number 4 squadron markings, as you can see here. Just pulled a few decals out of the spares box, just random off random various sheets that would fit. We've gone with wraparound because it is the single coolest scheme ever worn by a jet aircraft, and we've got some laser guided bombs, a couple of sidewinders and a few fuel tanks on there. If I go closer you can see there is another wing pylon fitment there, but I didn't want to put anything else on. I'm happy with that. This one's got a dirty exhaust, sort of dirty looking jet pipe on the it's a justification that RAF planes are always minging, and this one is clean with the white inside. So as you can see, this one's got the AMRAAMs, the AGM-84s, recce pod and tiled and what have you for the front. So yeah, I think these are really sweet little kits. I think the normal retail is something like £26 for this double kit, and as you can see there's a lot there. There's a load left over, but it's of questionable value because it's all toon stuff, but there's a bunch of weapons and none of these are glued on, so if you really felt the need you could mess about and change the weapon loads on this to suit. How are they compared to other tuner egg planes, if that's even a thing? Let's put these two up here because they're the main. So I have a couple of others. First off, I have an Hasegawa egg Harrier, which I finished as a US Navy Harrier. Did this quite a while ago. The egg planes, I think they're a little bit old school actually in comparison to this sort of thing. They mostly feature raised surface detail where they have any, and they're not the easiest builds. They tend to be a bit gappy and need a bit of help. But regardless, I think the Harrier definitely suits the egg plane concept. It does to me anyway. Excuse sniffles, I do have yet another cold. And the other two that I have are GWH. So I have this GWH F-35 finished as per markings that come in the kit, and finally I have another GWH. This time it's an F-15 in this sort of Japanese scheme, And in both cases with these, I jazzed the pilots up a lot. I used spare decals off the sheet and gave them sort of fighter pilot helmets there for a bit of interest. And you can see in all of these, apart from this one, I have, as I said, tinted the canopies, which I just think it looks better, personally. And there you go, that's my little egg and toon plane collection for you, all together in one place. I think if you look at them, I think you can see that these GWH kits are a cut above. The fit and finish on these is much better than it is on these. Much more subtle panelising and what have you. The egg plane is easily the worst one, both in terms of fit and finish and detail actually, but who cares about detail, it's just a toy. So yeah, toon planes, they're really, really silly. You can't take them seriously, and as such they're an excellent tool for modellers, I think, because as long as you can suspend disbelief for long enough to just get on and make one, they're just so easy and quick. When you get that thing where maybe you've just finished a big project or two and you're feeling a bit, I don't know, burned out, lacking mojo, however it is people like to put it, and you just want a quick, easy build, palette cleanser is a phrase I've heard thrown around. These are absolutely perfect for that, because it just doesn't matter. You can do as much or as little prep as you want. You just smash them together and have a funny little finished model on your shelf within a couple of hours, really, if you really wanted to go for it. But certainly over the course of a weekend, you can smash one of these out quite happily. I think for that they're absolutely invaluable, and they're a lot of fun. Truthfully, a lot of fun. I really enjoyed them. So there you go. That is a quick review and full build, actually, of, let's move this all out of the way, the Freedom Model Cuts Compact Series F-16s. As I said at the beginning, these are currently on special offer at Hannants. £13 for this little double set. At that price, they're incredible value for money. This manufacturer also do many other boxings of F-16s, including the ones with all the bumps and chunks on the top. They do F5s and F104s. Shortly to be released as a C119 and a C130, which I'm quite interested in, obviously. So pop on over to Hannants and have a look at those if you're interested. But for now, that'll do. These are my Freedom Models F-16s, all done. Nice little bit of fun, quick and easy. Recommend it to anybody on that basis. So I hope that was of some use to somebody, some interest, or at least a little bit of fun. A little aside from serious modelling duties. And with that said, it only remains for me to say, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.